Watching Capital City Sunday.
Welcome back. Catching the nation's attention, two testimonies last week, one Dr. Christine Blasey Ford and the other aiming for the highest court, Judge Brett Kavanaugh. It was emotional and some angry testimony, all focusing around the allegations of sexual misconduct. I'm now joined by ERIN PARISI, the Executive Director of the Rape Crisis Center in Madison. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so I guess I just want to get your general reaction to not even this week, but the last 2 weeks or even 3 weeks before the allegations came out, how you're reacting to it.
It's been hard. It's been a rough time for survivors of sexual assault, and that's who we focus on. There have been an increase in calls, but probably even to our helpline and also to the national helpline. The day of Dr. Ford's testimony, there was a 201% increase in calls to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network helpline, and many of those get forwarded to the local agencies. So we had a significant increase. We haven't measured it, but a significant increase then as well. So a lot of people are very traumatized by this, and that's concerning. You know, everywhere I go, people want to talk, and and there will be a lot of conversations between mothers and daughters, between spouses who have never told anybody before, but may feel somewhat empowered to tell somebody, but not necessarily ready to reach out to somebody professional yet.
You said many people are empowered. Do you think, of course, that is why the influx of calls?
Yep.
Because watching this testimony, seeing her, so emotional,
yeah,
and her bravery to even do that it sparked something
yeah,
in a lot of men and women.
I think that the calls are related to the trauma that she sustained, in front of that body, and the listening to the trauma that she had sustained when she was sexually assaulted, and then the years that followed that her story is the story of so many women from people who are in college now to 65, 75-year-old women who went through that during their lives sometime when they were younger, and they've kept it secret all this time. So the calls were about that. Some of the more heartbreaking calls were people feeling guilty for not ever reporting it, feeling that it was their responsibility to report that to prevent their perpetrator from sexually assaulting somebody else. That's a heartbreaking call, because when you have been sexually violated, you really need to concentrate on taking care of yourself. And society sends a pretty clear message that if you report, you will go through what Dr. Ford went through. You are kind of assumed guilty of not telling the truth, while the alleged perpetrator is assumed innocent until proven guilty. We really have this kind of backwards when it comes to sexual assault.
And when it comes to trauma, I know President Trump mocked Dr. Ford's testimony, kind of saying, I don't know where it happened. I think there's a misconception about trauma and the gaps in memories. Can you explain that a little bit, of when someone does call, and even not during an interrogation, but even with law enforcement, when you're asked so many questions, it kind of puts you on the spot.
It does.
And you start, as what I've heard you even say, people might start changing their stories or can't remember.
Sure.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, part of that, you don't have to look too deeply into trauma to just think about that when somebody is repeating a story, that there are, especially something that happened a long time ago, or even something that happened recently, it is not going to be verbatim. There are snapshots that kind of take place while the assault is going on, and you may remember very specific things. I mean, I am now kind of speaking openly about a sexual assault that happened to me in college, and I can tell you what his breath smelled like. I can tell you the feeling of his hair in my face. I can tell you some other things that probably would be too traumatizing for people to hear that he did to me, but it happened during college, and I can't tell you what year during college. and it was in the first 2 years, sometime. But I knew that it was in a farmhouse during a party. Where that farmhouse was, I have absolutely no idea. I don't really remember that. So my memories of that are very common. That's a really common thing, that you have these like snapshots of what's happening at the time, and you will never forget those. You will never forget what the person looked like. What they smelled like is a really common thing, and you won't forget some certain things that were just happening at that time. And you're not going to forget who it was. That's the thing, is that you're not going to forget who did that to you, and you're not going to mistake them for somebody else. So that's important to know.
And when it comes to President Trump, and when he started mocking Dr. Ford's testimony, what effect did it have? It started getting me thinking, if someone's making fun of someone talking about allegations, do you think more people were scared because of the national attention you can get if you accuse someone of power? Or on the other hand, do you think it's empowering more people to come forward after seeing what Dr. Ford and her bravery? Do you think it goes both ways?
I do think it goes both ways. I think that people are going to get out of that what they could get out of it, and some people, I think there's also going to be, we're going to see things changing over the next couple of months. I think our helpline has definitely not maxed out. I think that the calls that we've been getting are going to increase, and I think we're going to see a lot more survivors coming in for counseling in the coming months, because I think those private conversations with family and friends are going to take place first. We've seen President Trump mock people before. The reporter with disabilities, it was somebody that he mocked, and so I think that some people are just going to see that as this is just a man who lacks empathy, but I think others who may have felt more positively towards him before are certainly going to feel hurt by what he did.
And I want to talk about the actual testimony. Now, despite the outcome of the votes, I want to read an op-ed that Brett Kavanaugh wrote, and it says, "I was very emotional last Thursday, more so than I ever have been. I might have been too emotional at times. I know my tone was sharp, and I said a few things I should have not said. I hope everyone can understand that I was there as a son, husband, and dad." What do you think about that? Is that an apology? And what do you think about his tone during that testimony? Because a lot of people are talking about it and how he came across.
Yeah, I think it was a man whose entitlement was at risk. It's a very common, kind of reaction that he went through. That's what the backlash is right now. There are, and a backlash will continue. If he is on the Supreme Court, which I assume will happen, there will be people feeling very empowered by that, and part of that empowerment will be men can continue to operate with this sense of entitlement to women's bodies, because that's the way it is right now in our country. And I really took his reaction as kind of a temper tantrum of something that he felt that he deserved, to be able to have the job he wants, have the woman he wants, do whatever he wants, and not pay the price for it, because he didn't deserve to pay the price.
Now we have about a minute and a half left. I want to have you weigh in about the FBI investigation. Obviously it's the FBI, but they were given only a week to investigate this.
Yeah.
I talked to a local law enforcement here who deals with sexual assaults and takes those inquiries in. He says it doesn't take a week. Sometimes can take months, maybe even years.
Yes.
Do you think there was enough time to investigate these claims?
Absolutely not.
And
absolutely not. That was politics, purely politics.
And do you think there's a mischaracterization that people don't understand how long this takes?
There is.
I mean, it depends on every case.
It does. Every case is different, but there's evidence to collect. There are people to interview. There are, I mean, in this case, the evidence is long ago gone, but all cases take a great deal of time and effort. And there are people who do this for a living that, this was certainly kind of a mockery of the people who actually investigate sexual assaults, to assume that it could just be, done like that, and that this could be wrapped up in a week. That was about politics, so.
All right, that's all the time we have. Thank you for joining me.
You're welcome.
That's it for this edition of Capital City Sunday. I would also like to thank Mandela Barnes for joining me today. If you have any interview suggestions or questions for the show, feel free to email me. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next week.